All right.
Good.
Yeah. I think we are
Sweet.
live.
Hello, everybody. Just handled the post.
Just share this.
This is episode 30. Does that sound right?
All right. For those of you popping on, like Sharon, say hi. Let us know you're here.
Broski, this is episode 30, I think.
I have no idea.
I think as hard as that is to believe already.
I mean, it sounds right, but yeah, I haven't really been keeping track like that. So,
Okay, I'm pretty sure it's 30.
all right, tell me when you're ready.
I will be in just a second. Just doing the post for everybody.
All right, I'll just say hi to a few people here.
Yeah, that'll work.
All right, so who else we got here? We got Sharon, we got Mary. What's up, Mary? We got Rachel Conrad. How are you? And we got more people pouring in. So,
I'll give it that minute anyway.
yeah. How are you over there? Waking up super early.
Today's one of the rougher days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was ravaged by mosquitoes for the last 3 hours, so I'm not really sure.
Have you tried? I don't know if it works, but have you tried any of those apps
Oh, like
that make
the
that
ones that just put
sound?
out the frequency? Yeah, I've tried it. I've tried it. They definitely work. I mean, we did the same stuff we had when we were kids.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering if you did it.
I just fell asleep and I had no idea there was a mosquito in the room until I woke up with my arm about twice the size. And there's a
Gotcha.
net there's a net over here, but once they're in, they're in. You don't know where they are. And I think it was only one because I found the fat little bug this morning. Needless to say, his life has been sacrificed.
So much for not killing bugs.
I felt like he had his moment in the sun. Usually I feel pretty bad about that kind of stuff. I'm like, all right, feed, like circle of life. And then like I woke up this morning, I'm like, my left arm has just bites like everywhere. So I'm like, you need to go.
Now that you're full of my blood.
I feel like we've had an equal exchange. If his life was like 30 or 40 years, I wouldn't have done that. Anyway, let's continue.
Let's continue. So, did you have something specific in mind that you wanted to discuss today?
No, I do not.
Okay,
I could riff off, but go ahead.
no, I have something, and I think it's poignant and timely
Okay.
about power of communication, and just to kind of, I think what happened even with us this morning and getting clarity around that stuff. I even posted a little thing today about love equals communication. And I saw a lot of people kind of resonated with that. So I think it's something that, even though we've definitely spoken about it before, I'm sure never gets old and is worthwhile hearing over and over again.
Works for me.
Yeah, good?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So let me just tell them a little bit of the story of what happened, and then we can kind of go from there and give them some distinctions.
Sure.
So I want to just create a context with you guys before we dive into this conversation, and that is, hey, Natasha, hey, Matt, and that is that just because Guy and I have been doing this for 15 years, combined 30 years between us, and God knows $1 million plus on this form of education and experiences. it doesn't mean that we still don't deal with the same things that every human deals with. The biggest difference, and I wrote about that this weekend, is like the biggest difference between someone who's worked on themselves and has developed their mindset versus someone that hasn't, is that when certain things arise, whether it's circumstances or thoughts or interactions, for the most part, I still feel like the first reaction and the first thing I hear is still that same old stuff, right? The difference is that someone who's spent their time developing their mind has a tremendous ability to either hear that thing for what it is, which is just, something chattering in your head, have the volume turned way down on it, and then not buy that it's them. It's not their reaction. It's just something that's occurring, and listening to it as such, and then having the ability to respond, or at least have a choice to respond differently. The undeveloped mind, or persons who are not trained or developed, buy into that stuff, hook, line, and sinker, and then are completely at the effect of that thought, of that circumstance, of that interaction, whatever it might be. And it's like knee-jerk reaction human beings, right? They just hear something, they react to that thing, and that thing completely spirals their entire day. And this occurred to me this weekend because I walked over to the sink. I'm just giving you like the minutia of life, right? I walk over to the sink, and I saw that there were my wife's shaker bottle in the sink, and our dishwasher is like right there to the left. 2 other cups are there, and I literally walk over. Guy's laughing because Guy's a Virgo, and this is like his entire life. I walk over, and my thought is, why are you so lazy? Why didn't you just rinse the cups and put them in the dishwasher? Right? That's my initial reaction. And here's the difference. Most people, if you think about even your relationships, it might not be all relationships, it might be this one particular relationship, would buy that thought, hook, line, and sinker, would paint their wife or significant other as someone who is lazy and inconsiderate, and would be pissed at that person without communicating that to them for the entire day. Then that person would do something else, which would feed into their story of them being lazy and inconsiderate, which would make them even more distasteful of this person. And this is someone that they live with, are supposed to love and adore. And meanwhile, like I'm running around, I'm doing stuff around the backyard, I'm all sorts of stuff. And I come into the house literally to get a drink. And she's like, I'm looking through the glass at the deck, and she's just laying on the deck, just soaking in the sun, right? So all of this stuff I want you guys to know is going through my head. And the difference is that I can hear it as what it is. Just a knee-jerk reaction of a human being process. Like, that's the machine. That's what it does. And instead of buying into it and being upset at my wife or holding a grudge that I'll never communicate to her, I was just like, oh, hey, silly brain, that's really crazy that you just came up with that. Like, I don't feel that way at all about my wife. In fact, I'm super happy that she's getting to lay outside and doing the thing that she loves to do the most. And honestly, what's the big deal for me to wash a cup and stick it in the dishwasher? And that's what I did. And it was over.
So I want you to create a distinction here. What's the difference between operating that way, feeling those things, seeing those processes, and why is that different than like burying it down? Like, and what I just like to clarify, I mean, like buried down, like people have certain responses, they're having the response, And then they're like, well, I want to protect myself and them from emotions, whatever kind of justification somebody might have for operating that way. And yet they're not really fulfilling that process. Like they don't release it. Like you said, it's like something you hold on to, and then you start finding more evidence. And then it's like 2 days later and you're exploding in the car and you're like, well, 2 days ago, you blah, 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 right. And it starts becoming this like big argument instead of,
or they wouldn't even do that. I don't even think they wouldn't remember. Maybe women would, but a man would not remember why.
It's like the timer is set. Yeah.
Yeah. He wouldn't remember why he got upset, but like, what happens is this is the normal mind. This is how it operates. So man goes outside, does all this work around the house. Wife is just hanging out, doing her thing. He walks over to the sink, like sees these cups, and is like, motherfucker. I'm running around like a maniac right now, doing all this shit, and this lazy bum is just sitting out there. And here's the thing. They won't say something. They won't go out to their wife, or if they do, it's going to be like, why the fuck are you this? And da-da-da, you lazy bum, I'm that, like being righteous and all that stuff. I would only say probably 10% of people have the balls to do that. What 90%, or I should say 89% do, because 1% act differently, 89% do, is they just bottle up inside and go, oh, God, I'm running around, I'm doing all this shit, she doesn't do anything, blah, 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 right? And then fast forward a couple hours later, you're sitting at the dinner table, for example, and she is relaxing today and
broski.
Yeah.
I think you've hit that home, Dad. I think they get the point. Like, so back to the question is, what's the distinction between burying it down and actually dealing with it in a way that quote unquote is transformed or conscious, so that those responses and those kind of explosions are not there?
I have no idea what you mean by that question. So why don't you answer it? Because
I don't. I'm asking you from your perspective. Somebody's having a situation like that where they're getting agitated, right?
Yeah.
There's a consciously working through it, whether it's with yourself or through communication. You started with saying communication is love. And then the other way is, you kind of like bury it down, whether it's conscious or unconscious that you're doing that, and then it's creating all sorts of problems. So what like experientially, how would you define those experiences?
Well, the one option is to bury it down, like I said, and that's what I was saying right now. So you bury it down, and what happens is that basically paints your entire life. So then everything that she does for the rest of the day, for the rest of 2 days, for the rest of the week, whatever it is all through that filter of what you just made up. Like, my wife is lazy and is inconsiderate, right? Like, say I said that, okay? And then so you go throughout every single day. Now, your wife could be super loving. She could be, but you won't notice the fact that she made lunches for your kids and cleaned the house and made dinner and went to pick up whatever for the kids after work. You don't notice any of that. All you keep looking for is evidence to prove your story about that she's inconsiderate and lazy, and you'll find it. And so what eventually happens is you basically start building this rift, and that rift, because you're not communicating this stuff, the rift is like that first thing is like a wedge. Imagine like you stuck a wedge in a relationship. That first thing that I would have potentially made up or my brain spat out, right? Like that would have been the wedge. And then what happens is like every time you reinforce it, you're basically like hammering that wedge. And so the rift between you gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger till eventually 20 years later, people are like, I fucking hate you. Right? And it all started with this insignificant, nonsensical thing that just happened. And you were unconscious to it occurring. Now, I don't want to say the transformed way, but the elevated way to approach it, and the way that I approached it, is I know that, right? I know that if I were to listen to that silly thought of whatever it is that reacted, right? And by the way, just so you get an experience of this and you guys kind of understand who's reacting, the first thing that reacts is a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. It's like, you're supposed to take care of this, right? That's the upset little child. So when you can relate to the fact that that voice in your head is just a little hurt child, you don't give it weight. So in that moment, I had a choice, right? So I hear this voice in my head and I'm like, look, if I choose to believe that, how is my relationship with my wife going to look? What is my experience going to be like? I'm not even talking about like a year from now, like in the next 2 hours, what's my experience going to be like with my wife? Not great. So I'm like, okay, how can I transform this? How can I upgrade this conversation? And so I sat there and I thought like, okay, well, what is the real thing that I want to believe right now? And the real thing was that like, she was running around. What's the big deal? I can wash these cups and put them in the dishwasher. It's absolutely no big deal. And I got to look out at my wife lying there in the sun and just acknowledge how much she is in her absolute heaven and peace. And she gets to do this because for all the taking care of that she does of me, of the kids, of everything around us, like this is her moment to relax. And I love that she has that, right? And in that moment, totally different distinction around my wife. Now, for some people, like, and this is the next piece that I want to talk about, is what happened with Guy and I, because I think this will kind of drive it home a little bit, is how to handle it. Like, I did that internally, right? I didn't even tell my wife that.
That was my question. Like, did you guys have a conversation at all?
No, because it was
like a menial thing, yeah.
Yeah, that was just nonsensical. Like it wasn't even worth the conversation. You know, it's just like a knee jerk thought just popped up. It wasn't anything to even consider. But I think, however, what happened between you and I today was much more of when stuff like that actually have the conversation, and that's what I want to take it into right now. So I was meditating this morning, and I've become very, very aware during my morning meditations specifically that the thoughts that are arising and coming up are things that I have been thinking about and have had reactions to, and I haven't said. It's like stress bubbles being released of things that I didn't even realize that I was stressed or upset about. Because at the time, like, you know, like this with my wife, right? So like I have these thoughts all the time, and my brain is really good now through doing this for a long time of being able to like process them so fast and be like, no, I choose this, right? Like it does that automatically. So a lot of the times I don't even realize what's leaving residue and what's not. And in my morning meditations, I find that like that residue just kind of like bubbles to the surface, and I could just sit there as an observer and be like, oh, that's so interesting. Like I had that thought, I didn't communicate it, I didn't even realize that was upsetting me.
Sure.
And so this morning I woke up and I'm in meditation, and the thought that came up was that Guy and I are completing a project. And for those of you guys that don't know, we are in the final leg of launching an app, a SatoriPrime app for both Android and iOS devices. We're launching a webinar series that you guys will be able to then share, I hope happily, with people in your lives to really get them to understand what it is that you've been up to and what it is that we do and what our academy is all about and how you can work with us and all that stuff. And so there's a lot of moving pieces. And one of them is, you know, like giving notes and stuff like that to these videos for the app. And what came up was like, Guy isn't helping me. I'm having to do all of this on my own. Why isn't he helping me? And I was like, interesting. It's funny because like when you're in meditation, or at least for me now in meditation, I don't get triggered. It's just like observing a movie of your thoughts. It's like, but there's no actual reaction to it. So I was like, okay, well, I guess that means like I haven't communicated that and I want to communicate it with Guy. Now, I will tell you that the way that we communicated it with, because obviously guys in Bali and sleeping at the time that I'm awake, so it's like a little bit difficult. I had to shoot it in a text, and text is not a great way, as Guy and I have found, to have these conversations. But in any event, I communicated with him. I was like, I don't remember the exact way I said it, but something like, I've asked you to help me with this. I really need your help on this. What's the best way? Well, I mean, I can fucking read it. Why am I trying to? Give it to you as is. All right. All right. So I wrote, bro, why can I not get your help on my quest stuff? How else should I request it from you? Now, in my head, what I was asking for was a way to communicate with Guy to let him know that I need his help, and like in what medium is it? Like in my head, I was like, okay, do I ask for it here? Do I tell you here? Like, how do we communicate? Especially now that he's traveling, communication has been a little bit tougher. And clearly, as you can even hear from what I wrote, as I'm reading it back, I'm like, that is not the best way to write that. But again, like, we have a lot of stuff in our heads, and then we write stuff and we feel like the person is in there with us. So we like give them the cliff notes, even though we've gone through, like, I went through a whole fucking process in my head in the morning. He had no idea that the process went on in my head in the morning, right? So I'm like, I just throw this at him, and this is what he's left with. So obviously, Guy got triggered, and Guy, got defensive and was like, he's writing back like, be empathetic to my situation. I'm traveling, and just so you guys know, like right now for Guy, it's 3:20 in the fucking morning. He's been waking up for every single one of these calls, every one of our coaching calls, every one of our training calls. Like it's amazing that he's even done it. It's like way beyond what I expected. So my intention was never to make him wrong. It just didn't come out the right way. So there's a few things here that I want to talk about, and then I'd love Guy to share his point of view. The first thing I want you guys to get is like, when that arose for me, that stress bubble, basically, when that arose, I had a choice. Most of the time, you have these persistent kind of thoughts, like nagging annoyances, and you do the same thing that we spoke about before. You just bottle them up and disregard and disregard and disregard. And I'm telling you right now, I'm not like a scientist, but I've read enough books of very, very smart scientists. This is the shit that gives you cancer. This is the shit that eats you up from the inside, because you're leaving like dark residue, dark energy in your body. It's going to affect you negatively. It just is. Now, that's why meditation is so important, right? Like, meditation is releasing of that shit. Now, when you're actually aware of it, that's the thing that arose for me, is like, oh, I'm not communicating something with my brother. So again, going back to that original story, what there is now is a wedge in between us. And I know that if I don't remove wedge now, then what my brain is going to continue to do is it's going to keep hammering. Like, Guy isn't helping me. Guy's not working on our business. Guy's letting me down. And it's like, ding, 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 ding. Till eventually that fucking wedge is here, and I'm super pissed at him, and he has no idea fucking why. And then how does that impact our relationship? I'm not even talking about our business, right? Like, you can get, if that's the energy now that's in our business. And here's the thing, even if Guy doesn't know whether I'm upset or not, like, have you been in a relationship where that's happened? Tell me you don't feel the distance. Tell me you lose connection, you lose intimacy, right? When communication is gone, intimacy and connection cannot exist. Therefore, love cannot exist. Now, in that state, so Guy is like probably in his world feeling like, what the fuck did I do? Like, why is something off, right? So now he makes up stories and he reacts to this. And you're in this back and forth ping pong shit of, and no one knows why. And all it takes is open your goddamn mouth. So I want God to share, because like literally in a span of 5-10 minutes, all of this was handled. And it boiled down back to communication, but I just want them to kind of hear your end of the story as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I think everything in these situations comes down to a degree of integrity, and what I mean by integrity is not even necessarily like a promise in this case, but like what's the container, what's the context that you're speaking from? Like Ilan mentioned, obviously it's really late for me. I've been not on every single call, but I would say probably like 85-90% of all calls that I would generally be on. Gotten actually quite a bit of work done while I'm here. And also because we handle like different sides of the business. A lot of times we're just not in communication about what we're doing. And there's like, I end up doing a lot of like maintenance stuff for our business and stuff like that. Anyway, so like my world is, that I have been doing like stuff, probably like stuff above and beyond what people would normally do when they're traveling here, and, putting in full days of being around Bali and a whole bunch of other like personal things that have been going on for me. So anyway, my experience is that I'm on top of it, and then you get messages like that, and it's like, okay, the first thing that came up for me is like underneath the surface is like a lack of appreciation, and that's not new for me either. It's not like Ilan triggered not being appreciated. That's just like a go-to for me, and when I get defensive about stuff. So it was interesting because there was like I used to get reactive like that and have a lot more hostility in those situations. And it's more, for me, it was the same thing. I was like, I'm just going to be in communication about what's not working in this communication for me. I think, even reading it back again, right? Like, I think you could hear like the make
Absolutely.
wrong in there. Right. So, the thing is with communication is there's a way to communicate anything. But we often add like some kind of make wrong in there, and oftentimes we don't even know that we're making them wrong. And that's just what comes across, right? And then there's like a lack of context. Of course, I didn't know what was going on in his experience. And really all that was required in that situation was to be like, okay, well, how better could this be communicated in the future, that should something else like that come up, like we have some kind of agreement about how to best communicate some kind of breakdown that's happening within the company or personally that we're having within ourselves, that doesn't involve like an emotional response of, I'm making you wrong for this thing. And, and for anybody who's ever been on the receiving side of that, and that's been every human I've ever met, I'm sure at some point in your life, it's nearly impossible not to get defensive when somebody's making you wrong. And I think anybody can map this onto their relationship with their parents or with a loved one when they're, like Ilan said it with his wife, they're doing something or they're operating something that's outside of the weird parameters that you've set inside your head and the rules that you've created within yourself that you haven't communicated to somebody else. So it's like mostly we're breaking each other's rules, and these rules are not even rules that we've talked about. And then it's like in your head, that person's out of integrity with you, and that person doesn't even know that they're out of integrity with you. So again, it's just like managing ourselves and like checking in. I think you gave two good examples. Like Ilan had an emotional response to something his wife did. He checked in with himself and he's like, okay, that doesn't feel great for me. Is this something that's worth communicating about, or is it something that I could just kind of like let go and handle myself? I'm sure if he got himself in a situation with his wife where he found that it doesn't feel good for him and it wasn't being diffused, like it was carrying on, he would go and look at, or at least ask somebody for some feedback about what needs to be communicated. And in a situation like this, like he probably had thought about it a few times, like different things have been going on for the last few weeks. And it was like something that persistently came up for him over and over again, which is why he chose to communicate it. And I think at the end of the day, it was just about creating some kind of framework for integrity that in the future, when that integrity actually is broken, we could say, hey, like this is out of integrity and it needs to be put back in. And that's it. The moment it becomes personal, the moment it becomes like concluding that this person has some kind of trait or characteristic, and that trait or characteristic cannot be changed or broken, or you believe that they need to change that, like change never comes because you want somebody to change.
Yeah.
You know, like change comes because personally you want to change. I think for Ilan and I, we've both been doing enough work for enough time to know that we're both very actively committed to transformation. I don't like calling it change, but like transformation and like increasing our level of consciousness and awareness. So it's like if Ilan and I bring something up to each other, we know that there's enough foundation here of like we love each other and we want the best for each other. And if we see something, we kind of give each other the right to call each other out on it. You know, we're not just brothers, but we're obviously business partners as well. And like Ilan said, you know, like if you tell me that a personal relationship is not going to impact your business, you're just lying.
Yeah.
If you've ever watched Shark Tank, they're often assessing the relationship between partners, and they'll often say, if like, how is the relationship in the partnership? Because they know if there's a virus personally, there's a virus financially. It's just things just don't work out that way. So, you know, I think a lot of it has been that we've given each other this context of like, hey, we're moving in the same direction. We have a little aligned vision. And I think honestly, that's kind of what makes it, you know, an aligned future for me is everything. I remember, bro, like when you and Fanny were having something, it wasn't like an issue, but it was like something that kept coming up in the relationship. And I think you've talked about this before, but it's worth mentioning again. And I said, do you guys have a collective future?
Broski, you froze. I think I froze. I will hopefully he'll come back. I wanted to just close the loop on the conversation with Guy and I, so you guys kind of know where it all came from, where it all ended. So we went back and forth, and what is really important in these situations is I said something, right? I said, I read to you my text. My text was super simple. Like there wasn't a lot in it. And you could see how Guy, without any of the background or context that I had, how he could make that situation mean a whole bunch of other stuff, right? Now, he's not impacted by what I actually said. He's impacted by what he made what I said mean. And because of that, he's living in one reality and I'm living in another. And so generally, the simplest form and the easiest thing to do is to just communicate and get clear on, is this what you actually meant? Because as soon as he said, like, you know, he said something like, not that it's an attack, but like it's, you know, you're being very condescending, I think was the word he used. And I was like, I zero intention of being condescending. All I wanted to understand is I wanted to get clear on how to communicate better with you when I need your help. Because how I've been doing it has clearly been ineffective. That was my entire intention, right? Now, once he got that aspect of it, could you see how the rest just naturally flowed? Because now it's not him being defensive, I'm being defensive, etc. It's just, oh, here is the actual issue. How can we solve it? And guys, here was the solution. I never communicated in my request for help a deadline. I had a deadline in my head. The deadline in my head was last Friday. That was the deadline in my head. I never communicated that with Guy. So he's like, okay, we have this thing. He didn't know the urgency of it. He didn't know by when it needed to be done. He had none of that on his plate. It was all in my head. So what we got really clear about was like, oh, when I communicate XYZ project, I need to iterate how urgent it is and by when we need this thing completed. Now, if I did that in the first place, could you see how none of this would happen? So here's the beauty. In that interaction, in me actually honoring that which, you know, the stress bubble that came up, realizing that that's not something I'm willing to bottle down. That's not something that I'm just going to like sit here. I know I have that amazing relationship with Guy. I know that we're aligned to the same vision. I know that he'll receive it. And my communication to him sucked. Didn't suck. It just wasn't the best approach, right? With all the tools and all the things that I know. And here's the thing. I know that if one approach in communication doesn't work, I have a million others. And if I communicate something and it leaves someone disempowered, upset, pissed, whatever it is, I can go back and clarify until the person gets exactly the intention, the communication, and where I was coming from. And as soon as that happened, we just had a beautiful conversation. So the end result was, one, give me an end date and a timeline of when things are actually due, and two, put them in my calendar. Super easy, super simple, problem solved. Now, that doesn't mean that shit like that doesn't arise again ever. It just means that what I want to share with you guys is, like, in communication, anything can be handled. Literally anything. I don't care the biggest hardship in your life. I don't care what the biggest, it doesn't matter. All of it can be handled in communication. And the thing to understand is it might not be one communication. It might take you 10, 50, 100 times to communicate in order to get to that level of clarity that you seek. So that both of you are on the same page and the person understands where you're coming from and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, is that worth it? For me, for us, for Satori? Fuck yeah. Not even a question. Right? And all of this was done in 10 minutes from halfway around the world. Predominantly, I would say like 50, 60, 70% of it was done text, which is not the best way to have these conversations, by the way. Okay? So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. Like, without that level of communication, things will not work in your life. You have to be willing to speak that which, hold on, I think I just logged back in here. Let me see.
Hey man, yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you must, if you want amazing relationships, if you want breakthrough results in your life, you must be willing to share that which you're thinking about and is just kind of like a nuisance a little bit, right? And get clear on what that is, because most of the time you made it up, if not all of the time. And when you make shit up, you live in a world of your made up shit. You respond to your made up shit, even if it's not accurate at all. Mm-hmm. And the way to get clarity is just open your mouth and speak to that other person. So the last thing I want to talk to you about, because guys said, you can get into these conversations and you may feel wrong, or someone says something and you feel like they're blaming you or something like that. And what Guy alluded to right before he bounced off, and I'm thinking this is probably the direction you were going, is when two people are aligned. You know, Guy and I have given each other permission to call the other person out for the greater good of our global impact, for our mission of 100 million people's lives transformed. You guys get, like, to transform 100 million lives, if one brother is sitting over here going, well, the other one isn't taking care of his shit and he doesn't care and he's not doing the work, do you think there's any chance in hell we're reaching 100 million people? Mm-hmm. No way. Right? So for me, the mission is always greater than anything that I can think or feel. And if I feel elated, empowered, fulfilled, love, etc., like, that's how I choose to feel at all times. Do I feel that way at all times? No. So when I don't, I now have a choice, and I know the tools on how to get that, to operate again from that space. So I have to remove that which is in the way of that. So I just want to go back to this. So there's two ways to operate. One is when someone shares something, anything with you, right? Like, Guy comes and says something to me. I could receive that as Guy making me wrong, Guy not appreciating me, or guy, blaming me for something or whatever. Okay, that's one option. And that's the way typically people receive any sort of communication. The other way is that it's just feedback. It's just feedback, right? Their experience is their experience. It's not actually them responding to you or anything like that. It's just them having their own experience based on whatever they just experienced. It's their old patterns. It's their old programming. It's their all that stuff. And they're having that experience around you. And so you can receive that information as feedback. Everyone in your life is a mirror for you if you choose to see them that way. And if you choose to receive things as feedback versus them making you wrong or blaming you, you're going to have a much easier go at life. You're going to learn much faster. You're going to grow much faster. You're going to develop yourself much faster. And so I just wanted to make that distinction that as you are interacting with people, see if you can take on feedback, the distinction feedback. Like, this is just feedback. Bro, is that where you were going with that before you got cut out?
Not exactly, but I think that's still good. A few things I would just say is, like, I think from the work that we've done, for me, it's just clear that whatever thought I'm having, whatever experience I'm having, regardless of how real it might feel or whatever it is that I'm going through, it's just simply not the truth. I have, countless evidence that there have been so many situations where I thought something was happening that just wasn't happening.
Yep.
So I'm just, anytime I share anything, it's never with this like conclusive, this is the absolute truth of the matter. So I don't interact with it that way. I'm just like, I'm currently having an emotional response. I'm speaking to that emotional response, and I'm totally open at all times that I'm not right. I know that I'm not. And I've pretty much just taken on across my life that I just don't know the absolute truth of anything. So I just never speak from, like, I might speak with conviction, but I don't speak with like that degree of conviction about anything anymore. And actually, even being around people who do, and like still argue for their point of view, argue about politics, argue about religion, I just find that draining these days. It's just, you're investing time on basically trying to cause and create agreement around you so that you can feel better about your own belief systems. And it's just kind of a waste of time. When I was talking before I got cut off, I was just talking about like you and Fanny, like I know at some point in time something was going on in the relationship. I don't remember what the situation was, but it was just like, I think you guys were butting heads a lot. And I said, do you guys have a collective future that you're working towards? And you said, what do you mean? And I said, well, when you guys got together, there was like looking forward to the future of the engagement. Then there was looking future of the wedding. Then there was looking to the honeymoon period. Then there was having the kids. And it's like, once Aaliyah came out, after that, I think this is where a lot of couples actually get into trouble. It's like, now there's no longer a created future. The kids become the created future. And the relationship sometimes takes like a back seat because there really is no future that you're both walking into. And I don't remember what you guys created together, but I remember you had like very consciously sat down and actually created like what was next for you guys as a couple.
Well, a lot of it was that conversation arose right before we went to Colombia, where there's like a lot of stuff that came up. And it was interesting. One of my things that I'd bottled up for a long time, and I was unconscious of it again, was
so I actually remembered it being way earlier than that, but that's fine if this is the example.
No. This is what came up was that Fanny wasn't listening to the podcast.
Oh yeah. Well, that's definitely not what I was talking about. That's okay. That's still a good example.
Yeah. That's what I remember right now. And like what I made that mean, there's two things I made that mean. One was she doesn't support me. The other one was that she isn't into personally growing. Both of which were absolute nonsense, by the way. And I was unaware at what kind of rift that was creating in our relationship. Like there was definitely a disconnect there. And so one of the things that, we got clear on was like what we're up to, what we'd love to do, what's important to us, things like that. And one of the things that she just came out and said right away was like, well, for me, I really am constantly striving to be a better wife, a better mother, things like that. And so we just decided to together personally grow in those tier areas and like read books about relationship, read books about being better parents, things like that, and then just have these discussions. So for me, that occurs like we're both playing the game of personal growth, right? And we're connected and we're up to our ultimate goal, which one of the goals right now is to be the most kick-ass parents we could possibly be and raise two amazing human beings. So yeah, it's I think a lot of it has to do with setting up the rules of the game so that people are aware what the fuck the rules are. A lot of the times we go through life like, right? So in my rules of the game, in our relationship, in order for me to feel supported, I wanted Fanny to listen to our work, like listen to the podcast and listen to calls and things like that. I had somehow collapsed those two things, like support equals her, listening to this stuff. And when I realized how I spun that in my head and what it's been doing for our relationship, like she didn't know, I never even asked. I didn't tell her like, hey babe, I would feel really supported if you actually listen to the podcast. I would just make like snarky, shitty remarks when my parents, who are avid listeners, would be like, oh my God, this episode was so good. I would say something like, oh, Fanny wouldn't know anything about that. Right? Which didn't make her feel good. Definitely didn't make me feel good. And these are these little things that you might think are insignificant, and they are the most significant things in your relationships. If I held on to the thought that guy isn't helping our business or isn't, which is also cockamamie, like the amount of shit that guy does that I have no fucking idea that he does is astronomical. And I'm getting hung up on him not doing something about, it's just, this is what our brains do. And this is what I'm telling you, like ours are no different than yours. They're not. It just, we have tools to distinctions so that instead of figuring this stuff out 3 years later when our relationship has gone to shit and our business has gone to shit with it, we spent 10 minutes on Voxer and got it handled and got an awesome solution out of it. Which would you rather have? The master is constantly falling out of balance, just finds balance way faster so you guys don't even notice. If I didn't share this with you guys, you would have no clue that happened in the world of Guy and Ilan and SatoriPrime today. This literally happened, I don't know, what is it, 7 hours ago, 6-7 hours ago. And that's the power of this work. And that's what I'm telling you, like, having it all is building relationships, having incredible tools of communication with yourself, with others, with situations. It's all relationship. You have a relationship to your bank account. You have a relationship to your body. You have a relationship to your spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend or people that you want to date. You have a relationship to your kids if you have them. You have a relationship to your boss, to your job. It's all relationships. And you make up stuff about these relationships all the time. And it completely paints the way you live your life. And if you don't have tools to repaint or at least realize that you're the painter of it and that you're responding to your own painting and none of it out there is actually real, then you're stuck. And it doesn't matter how much harder you work and how many more books you read or amazing videos on YouTube you watch, it's not going to make a difference because the experience of life isn't changing for you.
I think it would be fair to say, I wrote the topic is love communication and communication is love. And I would think that's true to the extent that you're aware of your occurring. I'll just say that again. So I wrote, is communication love and love is communication? I think a lot of people would actually agree with that. And I would say communication could be extremely disruptive and destructive. So is communication love? Maybe not. At least not when it's propagated outside of being conscious of what's occurring for you. So I would actually say love is in the occurring, because if my occurring world is my love is amazing, she's incredible, she can do no wrong, she's the best thing since sliced bread, best thing walking the planet, I'm going to communicate to her from that occurring, and I'm going to feed energy into that belief of how it's occurring. The moment that occurring shifts, and this is actually what happens a lot in relationships, like people go through their honeymoon periods, and during that honeymoon period, there's this occurring of just this beautiful exchange of energy with one another, right? Like give, and then you have a situation like this come up where something upsets you. You have this something's wrong here moment, and then the occurring shifts. And then when the occurring shifts, you stop giving energy. The person feels you stop giving energy. They start going, oh, what's wrong here? They start withholding their energy. And now you both are in your own occurring world, right? That's different from each other. It's not in alignment. It's not in integrity. And you're both, because it's occurring differently for each other, you're starting to take that energy of the relationship and you're moving it in two different directions. And each one's trying to control it and manipulate it and take it where they want to go. And the other person's not where I want to be, not my occurring.
Yep.
So these conversations are about creating alignment in what's occurring. And that was kind of what the conversation was. It's here's how it's occurring for me. I'm well, here's how it's been occurring for me. I'm and I get, and then it's the willingness for both parties to actually give up the occurring and then generate a unified occurring so that both people are speaking into the same container.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's just one person speaking to one container and the other one to the other. Yeah. So
and just to point out and really drive this home, the important thing to take away is that the occurring world is made up.
Mm-hmm.
It's your made up painting of an occurring world. And here's the thing: you make up a painting, you go live in that painting. And if in that painting, the person who you're interacting with, let's play out the thing with my wife. Say I bought that story that I made up originally about her, right? I live in that world. Whether I say something to her or not, like Guy pointed out, she gets impacted by my occurring world.
Mm.
She doesn't know why. Because it's not something I'm doing, or, it's just an energy. Our energy affects other people around us. So now she isn't receiving a certain energy from me, which unconsciously to her alters her occurring world. Something's missing in my world. And this is where we start making shit up. This is where the justifications start. Well, it's because the person is that way. Or it's because they're not doing this, or it's because they're doing that. And the answer always lies where? Here. You. If you want any level of power in your life, never look outside. It's not them doing something. It's not that situation doing something. I can share with you guys so many stories. Everything happens for you, in your favor. Even if you don't think or see it now, it is all happening in your favor. I'll just give you I'm going to rattle off 3 things here just quickly of what's been occurring in my life. We ordered a hot tub. My friends actually, all for my birthday, chipped in and raised a ton of money to get me a hot tub for my birthday weekend this weekend. The hot tub was not going to be delivered on this day. I basically send a message to everyone. I was like, look, here's the occurring. Please keep creating that this happens. Fanny writes a letter. We get the hot tub delivered on Friday, this past Friday. Okay. It was supposed to be delivered after whatever, like it was supposed to be delivered on Thursday after this whole rigmarole. The delivery people never showed up. The company we bought it from ended up contacting this thing, went through this whole thing. We got it delivered, and not only to the end of our driveway, but to the actual location, which saved us about $250 of getting it delivered. More than that, because of this whole delay in story, they're going to actually cover our electrician setting everything up for us. So now 2 of our biggest expenses are being covered because this was delayed and we were upset. Okay. I'm going to a show for my birthday on Thursday. I just got an email from the show apologizing that the space that they got, this and that, and because of it, they haven't been able to get things on time. So this show is now actually a dress rehearsal. We've refunded you 100% of the ticket price. We'd still love for you to come to be there at the dress rehearsal. So it's like a final dress rehearsal type thing. So now I'm just telling you, like, look, you can be in an argument with your occurring world. The entire time as all this mess is happening all around my life with the hot tub and all that stuff, all I kept saying was like, Fanny, this is perfect. This is going to play out exactly how it's supposed to play out. Like the tub will be here when it's supposed to be here and all that stuff. And like, we're getting money off the hot tub. They're paying for this. They're paying for, like, it's just give up your occurring world and just create the occurring world that you actually want to live in. Because the one that you're making up that is upsetting you, you fucking made it up. It's bullshit anyway. So realize like it's all occurring. It's all perfect. This is exactly how this is supposed to play out. I may not know why. And as soon as you give it that energy, watch as like life just flows in effortlessness to you. And you just keep being in the state of wonder like, wow, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow, thank you, thank you, thank you. To the point that even Fanny was like, wow, my friend just wrote me this email. She's like, talk about magic around you two. First, the hot tub delivery on time. Now this, fuck yeah.
Well, look, I mean, and you could go and look at it and say, hey, this isn't what I want. Let me control and manipulate this outcome. And how do you know that by doing that, you're not stopping the flow of what you're about to receive that's even greater than what you had, right? Look, everything in the moment when it's not working out seems dire. And how often is it if we would just let it go and just be in surrender of that moment, that something so much greater is waiting for you on the opposite side of that? I mean, it's the same thing with relationships. Like I'm dealing with that right now, like letting go of love, right? And getting that complete and surrendering to that you don't know. And when I look at like every relationship I've ever had, the next one's always blown me away that much more than the previous one. And it's like difficult to imagine that it could even be greater than it's been. And it's like living into that. I would prefer to live into that future than into the future of the woe is me, why is this happening to me, right? And just always creating the occurring of something better is coming along. And I think for most people, they would say, yeah, if you could just let it go, generally speaking, life tends to bring you some pretty awesome shit. But if you're only focused on what's happening right now, how I feel right now, and then that's all that there is, yeah, it could be kind of shitty.
Yeah. Awesome. Broski, I love you.
Love you too, man.
I love our relationship. I love that we get to share this openly. And I don't know who I said this to the other day, but I was like, I think Guy and I definitely coach in a very different way than a lot of people. We're not here. Look at our shiny, amazing, beautiful lives at the top of this mountain. No, not at all. Every person, no matter who you think of, from Tony Robbins on down, that you know of, their lives just as fucked up as yours. And at the same time, just as beautiful, if not more so. And it's because the more you do this kind of work and the more tools and like the more you get into this world, you're altering your brain's chemistry. And things don't operate the same way in that operating system, which allows Guy and I to have these amazing relationships. And what I want, you guys have known us, some of you longer than others. And one of the things that you will always get from us is where we're at right now. And, Natasha was saying, thank you, Ilan, for courageously sharing examples of your own life with your blessed brother and your blessed wife. To me, that's life. I would love for there to be some sort of like cable that I can plug in from my brain into yours. The only way that I know how is through these stories and sharing actual experiences, not like, hey, I read this amazing chapter in this book, let me regurgitate it back to you. Go watch the other 75,000 people posting videos on YouTube. So like a lot of it is, this is it. This is life, and it's perfect and it's wonderful. And this is just the way that we choose to live it. And, the ability to be able to share this with you guys and have you guys listen to it this way and receive it this way. And hopefully it make a difference in your relationships with the people that you love and matter to you. That's all we're about. And I don't know if guys stuck links in there below, but if you want to find out more about how to gain these tools in your life, then just head over to SatoriPrime.com/coaching. And we'd be very, very happy to have those conversations with you and see what works best for you. And until Wednesday, which is actually my birthday, bro, are you going to be able to do the one on Wednesday?
No, I'm going to be up in the air.
Okay, cool. So on Wednesday, I'll do a birthday solo. If you guys have any questions, I know I posted this last time, which actually worked out really well. If you guys have questions for the Q&A, but you can't make it, please either personal message me, comment in this comment box below. I collect them, and it actually started a really, really great conversation on the Q&A last time instead of us just having to wait there and sit for people to drop in questions. So. All right. Love you all. Thanks for being here. Make it an incredibly powerful, enlivening week. And I'll see you guys on Wednesday.
Love you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, buddy.